The massive ships moved through space like floating cities made of crystal and metal. Each one was longer than 10 human battleships placed end to end. They belonged to the hegemony of the rulers of the galaxy for over 10,000 years. On the bridge of the largest ship, Emperor sat on his throne of living crystal. His body was tall and made of the same glowing crystal as his throne. When he spoke, his voice rang like musical chimes, but there was no warmth in the sound. "Show me these creatures again," he commanded. The viewing screen filled with images of humans. They were small, soft creatures covered in fabric. Their ships were crude things made of metal and powered by simple chemical rockets and fusion engines. To the Emperor, they looked like insects trying to fly between the stars. "They call themselves humans," said Commander, bowing low. His beetle-like shell gleamed under the ship's lights. "They come from a small yellow star they call Sol. Their planet is mostly water." The Emperor laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Water creatures with metal ships, how amusing. What do our scientists say about them?" "They are classified as Class 7 developing species, my lord. They have barely left their home star system. Their technology is at least 5,000 years behind ours. They still use nuclear fusion for power and kinetic weapons for war." Around the bridge, other members of the Hegemony Council watched the human images with amusement. There was Hive Queen, whose insect body was covered in beautiful patterns. Next to her floated the energy being called Prime, appearing as a ball of bright light. The robot mech commander Unit 7749 stood perfectly still, its red eyes glowing. "Nuclear fusion," repeated the Emperor with disgust. "We mastered zero-point energy extraction before their species learned to walk upright, and kinetic weapons, throwing rocks at each other like primitives." "Shall we simply ignore them, Emperor?" asked Prime, its voice crackling with electrical energy. "No," said the Emperor, leaning forward on his throne. "They have spread to 17 star systems. That is 17 systems too many. These creatures must learn their place in our galaxy." The hegemony had rules about such things. Any species that developed space travel had to submit to their rule. It had always been this way. The hegemony brought order to chaos, civilization to barbarism. They were perfect beings who had eliminated war, hunger, and suffering from their worlds. Lesser species should be grateful to serve them. "Prepare the standard offer," commanded the Emperor. "They will surrender 90% of their colonies. They will provide 30% of their population as workers. In return, we will allow them to exist under our protection." Commander activated the communication system. The message would be sent to every human world and ship. It was the same message the hegemony had sent to thousands of species over the. Most accepted immediately. The smart ones did anyway. The message was simple and clear. The humans had one solar cycle to accept the hegemony's generous terms. If they refused, they would be destroyed. No species had ever been foolish enough to refuse. 3 days later, the response came. Admiral Sarah appeared on the viewing screen. She was a middle-aged human woman with gray hair and steady eyes. Behind her stood other humans in simple military uniforms. Their technology was so primitive that the image flickered and had poor sound quality. "To the hegemony of," Admiral said calmly, "we have received your message and discussed it among all human governments. Our response is unanimous." The Emperor leaned forward, expecting the usual words of surrender and gratitude. "We respectfully decline your offer," Admiral continued. "Humanity values its freedom above all else. We will not surrender our worlds or our people. We wish to live in peace with all species, but we will not live as slaves." The communication ended. For a long moment, the bridge was completely silent. The Emperor's crystal body began to glow brighter, a sign of his growing anger. "Impossible," whispered Hive Queen. "No species refuses the hegemony." "Perhaps they misunderstood the message," suggested Mech Commander Unit 7749. "No," said the Emperor, his voice now sharp as breaking ice. "They understood perfectly. These creatures think they can defy us. They believe their primitive weapons can stand against our power." Commander Shell began to rattle with nervousness. "Should we send another message, my lord? Perhaps explain the consequences more clearly?" The Emperor stood up from his throne. His crystal body was now glowing so brightly that the other council members had to shield their eyes. "No more messages," he declared. "These humans need to see our power with their own eyes. They need to understand what happens when insects try to fight gods." "You want to deploy the demonstration fleet?" asked Prime. "Yes, send 300 ships to their home system. Show them our weapons, our shields, our technology. When they see how hopeless their situation is, they will surrender immediately." "And if they still refuse?" asked Hive Queen. The Emperor's laugh filled the bridge like the sound of a crystal mountain collapsing. "Then we will teach the galaxy what happens to species that forget their place. We will make an example of these humans that will be remembered for 1,000 generations." The orders went out across the hegemony fleet. 300 of their finest warships began moving toward the Sol system. Each ship carried weapons that could destroy cities and shields that had never been penetrated. Their crews were confident and proud, knowing they served the most powerful empire in galactic history. None of them suspected that they were about to encounter something their perfect minds could never understand, something that would shake the very foundations of their orderly universe. They were about to meet humanity, and humanity did not fight like any species they had ever known. The human detection systems picked up the hegemony fleet 3 days before they reached Earth. Admiral Sarah stood in the command center deep below the surface of Luna, Earth's moon. Around her, screens showed the approaching alien ships. 300 vessels, reported Lieutenant Commander Torres. "Each one is massive. Our computers can barely calculate their firepower." "Any response to our communication attempts?" asked Admiral. "Nothing, Admiral. They're broadcasting on all frequencies, but it's the same message over and over. Surrender immediately or be destroyed." Admiral studied the tactical display. The alien ships moved in perfect formation, like a parade rather than a military advance. Their technology was clearly superior to anything humanity possessed, but something about their approach bothered her. "They're not even scanning for our defenses," she observed. "They're flying straight toward Earth like they're visiting a museum." "Maybe they don't think we have any defenses worth worrying about," suggested Torres. Admiral smiled grimly. "Then they're about to learn something new." Commander stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the blue-green world grow larger on the viewing screen. Earth looked so peaceful, so vulnerable. A few primitive space stations orbited the planet, along with some basic defense platforms that wouldn't last 5 minutes against hegemony weapons. "Begin the demonstration," he ordered. "Destroy one of their orbital platforms, make it spectacular." The hegemony weapons officer, a tall gray alien with 4 arms, targeted the largest human space station. The plasma cannon charged with a sound like singing crystal. But before the weapon could fire, alarms began screaming across the bridge. "Multiple contacts approaching fast," shouted the sensor officer. "Small vessels moving at high speed." On the screen, hundreds of tiny ships appeared as if from nowhere. They had been hiding behind asteroids, space debris, even Earth's moon. Now they raced toward the hegemony fleet like angry wasps. "Fighter craft," Commander said dismissively. "Primitive interceptors. Our shields will stop them easily." The first wave of human fighters struck the hegemony formation like a thunderbolt. But instead of firing weapons and retreating as expected, something impossible happened. The human pilots flew their ships directly into the alien vessels. Commander watched in horror as a small human fighter smashed into the bridge of a hegemony cruiser. The impact shouldn't have done serious damage, but the human ship exploded with the force of a small nuclear weapon. The cruiser's shields flickered and died. "What was that?" he demanded. "The human ship was carrying some kind of nuclear device," reported his weapons officer, all four arms shaking. "They deliberately crashed into our vessel." "Impossible. No pilot would sacrifice himself for such a small tactical advantage." But more human fighters were doing exactly that. They rammed into hegemony ships while screaming battle cries over open communication channels. Some shouted, "Remember the Alamo." Others yelled for Earth and freedom. Many simply screamed wordless defiance as they died. The hegemony had never encountered anything like it. In their perfect society, every life was valuable and calculated. Deliberate sacrifice for military gain was not just foreign to them, it was incomprehensible. Worse, the human tactics were working. Each ramming attack took down shields or damaged weapons. The suicide strikes weren't random either. The humans were targeting command bridges, weapon systems, and engines with surgical precision. "Return fire," Commander ordered. "Destroy these insects." The hegemony plasma weapons blazed across space, but the human fighters were small and fast, and their pilots flew like. They dodged between the energy beams, using the hegemony's massive ships as cover. When the aliens tried to target one fighter, 3 others would attack from different directions. Then the human capital ships arrived. They were crude-looking vessels compared to the elegant hegemony craft, but they moved with purpose and coordination that surprised the aliens. Instead of energy shields, the human ships had thick armor plates. Instead of plasma weapons, they carried kinetic cannons that fired metal projectiles at incredible speed. "Those primitive weapons cannot penetrate our shields," declared Commander. He was wrong. The human kinetic rounds punched through hegemony energy barriers like they didn't exist. The alien shields were designed to deflect energy weapons, not solid metal traveling at a significant fraction of light speed. When the first rounds hit, they tore through hegemony hulls like paper. "Impossible," Commander shouted. "Our shields are perfect." "Sir," his sensor officer reported with terror in his voice, "the humans are launching some kind of electromagnetic pulse weapons. Our systems are being disrupted." The human nuclear devices weren't just explosive. They had been modified to create massive electromagnetic fields. These EMPs short-circuited hegemony electronics and caused their perfect energy shields to collapse entirely. Suddenly, the most advanced fleet in the galaxy found itself fighting primitive opponents with no shields and failing weapons. But the worst was yet to come. Several human ships moved alongside damaged hegemony vessels and attached themselves with magnetic clamps. Then human soldiers began cutting through the alien hulls with plasma torches and welding equipment. They were boarding the hegemony ships. Commander watched in disbelief as humans in crude spacesuits fought their way through his vessels. The aliens had superior numbers and better personal weapons, but the humans fought with a ferocity that terrified the hegemony crews. Human soldiers threw themselves on alien grenades to save their teammates. They used jury-rigged explosives to blast through bulkheads. They fought in hand-to-hand combat using simple knives against energy weapons, somehow winning through pure determination and tactical cunning. Most shocking of all, the humans worked together seamlessly. While hegemony forces followed rigid command structures, human squads made independent decisions and adapted to changing situations instantly. After 6 hours of battle, Commander made a decision that no hegemony commander had made in over 1,000 years. He ordered a retreat. 47 hegemony ships had been destroyed or captured by a species they had dismissed as primitive. Hundreds of aliens were dead or prisoners. The demonstration that was supposed to terrify humanity into submission had become a humiliating defeat. As the remaining hegemony ships fled back to their territory, Commander sent a message to Emperor. "The humans are not what we expected," he reported, his voice shaking. "They fight without logic or reason. They sacrifice themselves willingly. Their weapons are crude but effective. Their tactics are completely unpredictable." The Emperor's reply came back immediately. "Unpredictable creatures are dangerous creatures. If they will not submit willingly, then we will force them to submit. Prepare the war fleets. We end this now." But deep in his crystalline heart, something that the Emperor had never felt before began to grow. For the first time in his perfect life, was beginning to feel afraid. The Hegemony war fleet was the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. 50,000 ships from all 12 member species moved toward human space like a metal tide. Emperor had called every vessel, every weapon, every warrior in the Empire. This time, there would be no mistakes. "The humans will see our full power and surrender," the Emperor declared from his throne room. Around him, holographic displays showed the massive fleet's progress. No primitive species can stand against the combined might of the Hegemony. But the humans were already gone. When the Hegemony fleet reached the outer human colonies, they found empty space. The worlds were abandoned, their populations evacuated deeper into human territory. Mining stations were stripped of equipment. Even the space habitats had been dismantled and moved. "Where are they?" demanded Admiral, commander of the war fleet. His face twitched with confusion. "Our intelligence said there were millions of humans in this sector." "Perhaps they fled in terror," suggested his aide. But that wasn't what happened at all. 3 weeks into the invasion, the Hegemony supply convoy carrying fuel and ammunition for the war fleet simply vanished. One day it was there, guarded by 50 warships. The next day, the guards found empty space and debris. The same thing happened to communication relay stations, forward bases, and isolated squadrons. The humans weren't meeting the Hegemony in open battle. Instead, they struck from the darkness of space like ghosts, hitting targets the aliens never expected to be attacked. Doctor worked in a hidden laboratory on a captured Hegemony ship. Around her, human scientists and engineers studied alien technology with eager curiosity. They had been reverse engineering Hegemony equipment for months, learning how it worked and finding ways to improve it. "Their energy weapons are powerful but wasteful," she explained to Admiral via secure communication. "They generate enormous heat and require constant cooling. But if we modify our fusion reactors to mimic their zero-point energy extraction—" "English doctor," Admiral requested with a tired smile. "We can build weapons that hit twice as hard using half the power. And their shields have a critical weakness. They're designed to stop energy attacks from the front, but they're vulnerable to kinetic strikes from multiple angles." This was humanity's greatest advantage. While the Hegemony species had perfected their technology millions of years ago and never changed it, humans learned and adapted constantly. Every captured alien device was studied, understood, and improved upon in ways the original designers never imagined. Human ships began appearing with hybrid weapons, Hegemony energy cannons powered by improved human reactors. They used alien shield technology but modified it to stop kinetic attacks as well as energy beams. Most importantly, they combined the best of both technologies in ways that created entirely new capabilities. But the real surprise came when the Hegemony fleet reached the system. Admiral expected to find human defensive forces waiting for him. Instead, he found humans fighting alongside other species. Blue-skinned rebels flew ships next to human cruisers. 6-armed freedom fighters coordinated attacks with human marines. "Impossible," the admiral hissed. "Those species are loyal Hegemony citizens." His intelligence officer, a floating jellyfish-like creature, checked the records with obvious distress. "Sir, we've received reports of uprisings in 47 systems. Multiple species are rebelling against Hegemony rule." The humans hadn't just been fighting the hegemony. They had been talking to every oppressed species they encountered, sharing their technology and their tactics. Worlds that had lived under alien rule for centuries suddenly had the weapons and knowledge to fight back. Captain Maria Santos led a combined fleet of human and alien rebels against a hegemony supply depot. Her second-in-command was a massive reptilian named, whose people had been enslaved for 3,000 years. "Remember," she broadcast to all ships, "we're not here to destroy everything. We need those supplies for our own fleets. Disable their defenses, board their ships, take what we need." "What about prisoners?" asked in his deep, rumbling voice. "Anyone who wants to join us is welcome. Anyone who wants to go home can leave. We're not conquerors." This confused many of the alien rebels, for war had meant complete victory or total defeat. But humans fought differently. They won by making enemies into friends, by showing other species that there was another way to live. The raid was a complete success. The hegemony base surrendered after only token resistance, and most of its alien crew chose to join the rebellion rather than return to their home worlds as failures. News of human tactics spread across the galaxy faster than the hegemony could stop it. Species that had never dared to resist suddenly found themselves thinking dangerous thoughts. If humans could fight the mighty hegemony and win, perhaps freedom was possible after all. Emperor received reports of the spreading rebellion with growing fury. His crystalline body glowed so brightly that his advisors couldn't look directly at him. "How many systems have we lost?" he demanded. 17 worlds have declared independence," reported his intelligence coordinator, a slug-like creature whose slime trail showed his nervousness. "Another 31 are showing signs of unrest. The humans are broadcasting propaganda messages on all frequencies." "What kind of propaganda?" "They're not trying to convince species to join their war, Emperor. They're teaching them how to fight their own wars. The humans are sharing technology, tactical knowledge, even offering to evacuate civilian populations to safe worlds." This was perhaps the most alien concept of all to the hegemony leadership. They fought wars to conquer and control. Humans seemed to fight wars to free others and then leave them alone to govern themselves. "Deploy the enforcement fleets," ordered the Emperor. "Crush these rebellions immediately." But when hegemony forces moved to stop the uprisings, they found themselves fighting on dozens of fronts simultaneously. Every time they concentrated their forces in one area, humans and their allies struck somewhere else. The rebels used captured hegemony weapons against their former masters and fought with the desperate courage of people who had nothing left to lose. Worse, the human military tactics were spreading. Species that had followed rigid hegemony battle doctrines were suddenly using guerrilla warfare, ambush tactics, and coordinated strikes. The rebellion was becoming a revolution, and it was spreading faster than the hegemony could contain it. Admiral stood in her command center, watching reports flow in from across the galaxy. Human forces were outnumbered 1,000 to 1, but they were winning, not through superior firepower, but through something the hegemony had never learned to use. "Hope." "Admiral," reported her communications officer, "we're receiving surrender offers from 3 hegemony squadrons. They want to defect to our side." "Individual aliens or entire units?" "Entire units, ma'am. It seems many hegemony soldiers are tired of fighting a war they don't understand against people who keep offering them food and medical aid instead of death." Admiral smiled. This was perhaps humanity's most powerful weapon, the simple idea that enemies could become friends, that war could end in something other than destruction. The hegemony was learning that their perfect order could not defeat the chaotic creativity of evolution, and that lesson would soon cost them everything. The emergency session of the Hegemony High Council was unlike anything in their 10,000-year history. For the first time ever, The 12 species were shouting at each other across the Great Hall. The perfect unity that had made them masters of the galaxy was cracking like thin ice under pressure. Emperor sat on his crystal throne, watching his empire tear itself apart. His body flickered between different colors as his emotions shifted from rage to fear to desperate confusion. "This disaster is your fault," screeched Hive Queen, her insect wings buzzing angrily. "Your battle plans are worthless against these creatures." "My plans," Commander Shell rattled with indignation. "You insisted we use traditional formation attacks. When I suggested new tactics, you called me a coward." Prime, the energy being, crackled with electrical fury. "Both of you failed to understand these humans. They fight without logic. How do you defeat an enemy who acts irrationally?" "Perhaps," rumbled the massive stone creature known as Mountain Speaker, "the problem is not their irrationality, but our inability to adapt." Silence fell over the chamber. In hegemony society, adaptation was a forbidden concept. They had achieved perfection eons ago. Change was weakness, evolution was chaos. "Adaptation is the path of primitive species," declared Emperor coldly. "We are beyond such crude concepts." But even as he spoke, more reports arrived. The rebellion was spreading faster than their fleets could respond. Human technology was improving daily, while hegemony forces used the same weapons and tactics they had relied on for centuries. Mech Commander Unit 7749 processed data with mechanical precision. Current casualty reports indicate a 73% reduction in fleet effectiveness. Resource allocation shows critical shortages in 17 sectors. Probability of victory using current methods, 12% and falling. "Then we must change methods," said the Emperor, his voice like breaking glass. "It is time to use the weapons we swore to keep secret." The council chamber went silent. Every member knew what the Emperor meant, but none dared speak of it openly. The planet killers were the hegemony's ultimate weapons, devices that could destroy entire star systems by destabilizing their suns. They had been built in secret and hidden for a final guarantee of the Empire's survival. "Emperor," whispered Hive Queen, "the Galactic Accords forbid such weapons. We signed those treaties ourselves." "The Galactic Accords assumed civilized warfare," the Emperor replied. "These humans fight like animals. They have shown no mercy to our forces, taken prisoners instead of killing them, shared food and medicine with their captives. Such behavior is clearly barbaric." The twisted logic would have been amusing if it weren't so dangerous. The hegemony considered mercy and compassion to be signs of primitive savagery, while they prepared to commit genocide. "Target their colony world," ordered the Emperor. "New Brisbane in the Tau system. We will demonstrate that resistance to the hegemony means extinction." Doctor was working late in her laboratory when the alarms began screaming. She had been studying captured hegemony technology for months, trying to understand how their most advanced systems worked. Lately, she had been investigating some strange energy readings from certain hegemony ships, readings that suggested technology far beyond anything they had seen before. "Doctor," her assistant called out, running into the lab. "Long-range sensors are picking up something massive approaching New Brisbane. It's unlike any hegemony ship we've." Looked at the data streaming across her screens. The approaching vessel was enormous, powered by exotic matter that bent space around it. But most disturbing were the energy patterns emanating from its core. "My God," she whispered, "they're going to destroy the star." The planet killer moved into position at the edge of the Tau system. Its weapon charged slowly, gathering energy from the fabric of space itself. On New Brisbane below, 2 million colonists went about their daily lives, unaware that death was approaching on cosmic scale. But had been studying hegemony technology for months. She understood how their exotic matter cores worked, how they manipulated zero-point energy, how they bent the fundamental forces of physics. And she had learned something the weapons designers never suspected. Human quantum mechanics was more advanced than hegemony physics in certain specific areas. The aliens had perfected energy manipulation, but they had never developed the mathematical frameworks that humans use to understand uncertainty and probability at the subatomic level. "Send this to every ship in the system immediately," commanded, her fingers flying over the control panel. "Frequency 47.3, modulated quantum burst pattern. If I'm right, this will destabilize their exotic matter core." The signal reached the planet killer just as its weapon began to fire. The exotic matter core, designed to be perfectly stable and controllable, suddenly became chaotic and unpredictable. Instead of channeling energy toward the star, the weapon turned on itself. The planet killer exploded with the force of a small supernova. The blast was visible from 100 light-years away. But it had done something even more important. She had recorded exactly how the destabilization worked, and she broadcast that information across the entire galaxy. Every oppressed species in hegemony space suddenly learned that their masters had been hiding weapons of mass destruction for. More importantly, they learned how to turn those weapons against the hegemony itself. The reaction was immediate and catastrophic. On hegemony worlds across the galaxy, slave species rose in rebellion. They didn't just want freedom anymore. They wanted revenge against overlords who had secretly prepared to commit genocide against anyone who resisted them. But the worst consequence was within the Hegemony Council itself. "You authorized the use of planet killers without consulting us," raged Prime, his energy form blazing so brightly that it scorched the council chamber walls. "It was necessary," the Emperor replied, but his crystal body was flickering with uncertainty. "What other weapons have you been hiding?" demanded Mountain Speaker. "What other secrets has the Empire kept from the Council?" "We have kept no secrets," the Emperor lied. But trust, once broken, could not be repaired. Each of the 12 species began to wonder what weapons their allies might be hiding. Ancient suspicions, buried for under forced unity, began to surface. Hive Queen discovered that the cybernetic had been developing artificial intelligence weapons in violation of hegemony law. They revealed that they had been secretly enslaving other species for genetic experimentation. The energy beings admitted they had been planning to drain the life force from inferior, biological species. Every member of the Council had been breaking the very laws they claimed to uphold. The perfect empire had been built on lies, hidden weapons, and mutual betrayal. Within days, the hegemony was at war with itself. Admiral received reports of the Civil War with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. The aliens were destroying each other with weapons they had hidden for, each species convinced that the others had betrayed their sacred alliance. "Should we try to stop the fighting?" asked her tactical officer. "Some of those species might make good allies if they survive." "We'll offer refuge to any civilians who want it," Admiral decided. "But we're not going to save the hegemony from itself. They chose this path when they decided that fear and domination were more important than trust and cooperation." The galaxy burned as the ancient empire collapsed. Ships that had fought side by side for 10,000 years now turned their weapons on each other. Worlds that had known only peace under hegemony rule became battlefields as species settled old grudges with hidden weapons. And at the center of it all, Emperor sat alone on his crystal throne, watching his perfect empire crumble into chaos. He had one last desperate plan, one final gambit that might save his people from complete destruction. He would take every remaining loyal ship and destroy the source of all this chaos. He would destroy Earth itself, even if it meant the end of everything else. 3 years had passed since the hegemony first issued their ultimatum to humanity. Now Emperor led the last remnant of his once mighty empire toward the Sol system. Behind him followed 8,000 ships, all that remained loyal from the original 50,000 vessel war fleet. The Emperor's crystal body was cracked and dull, reflecting the damage to his spirit. His perfect empire lay in ruins, consumed by civil war and rebellion. Entire species that had served the hegemony for now fought each other with weapons they had secretly hoarded for eons. "This ends today," he declared to his bridge crew. "We will destroy their home world and show the galaxy what happens to those who defy the natural order." But as the hegemony fleet approached Earth, they found something that stunned them into silence. The Sol system was defended by the largest and most diverse fleet in galactic history. Human ships flew alongside vessels from dozens of species. Cruisers moved in formation with massive battleships. Energy beings from the Confederation provided shield support for reptilian saurian destroyers. At the center of it all flew Admiral Saris' flagship, a hybrid vessel that combined technologies from across the galaxy. It was crude and patched compared to the elegant hegemony ships, but it radiated a sense of purpose and unity that the aliens found deeply disturbing. "Impossible," whispered Commander, the Emperor's last loyal officer. "Those species hate each other. They have fought wars for thousands of years." "Perhaps," said the Emperor slowly, "that is precisely why the humans were able to unite them." Admiral stood on her bridge, surrounded by beings from 20 different worlds. Her second-in-command was the massive warrior who had become one of her closest friends. Her tactical officer was a former hegemony intelligence agent who had defected after learning about the planet-killer weapons. "They're hailing us, Admiral," reported her communications officer. "Put them through." Emperor appeared on the main screen, his damaged crystal form flickering with unstable energy. Behind him, the bridge of his flagship showed the strain of 3 years of constant warfare. "Admiral," he said, his voice like the grinding of broken glass, "you have destroyed everything. The galaxy burns because of your actions." "The galaxy burns because you refuse to accept that other species have the right to be free," Admiral replied calmly. "We offered to talk. We offered to share our space peacefully. You chose war instead." "We chose order. We chose perfection. Your chaos has infected the galaxy like a disease." Admiral studied the alien Emperor with something approaching sympathy. "Your perfection was stagnation. Your order was oppression. The galaxy isn't burning because of chaos, Emperor. It's growing because of freedom." "Growth is pain, change is destruction. We eliminated these things." "You eliminated life itself," said Admiral. "Every species needs to grow, to change, to become something better than what they were. When you stopped that process, you didn't achieve perfection. You achieved death." The Emperor's form flared with sudden rage. "Then we shall give you the death you deserve. All ships attack, destroy them all." The final battle for the future of the galaxy began. The hegemony ships moved in perfect formation, their weapons firing in synchronized patterns that had been refined over. Their tactics were flawless, their coordination absolute, their technology superior to anything they faced. It didn't matter. The Free World's coalition fleet fought like no force the hegemony had ever encountered. Ships from different species covered each other's weaknesses and combined their strengths. Fighters used their natural agility to distract hegemony gunners, while heavy cruisers moved in for devastating close-range attacks. Human ships served as coordinators, their crews having learned to communicate with dozens of different species in just 3 years. They translated orders between allies who had been enemies for centuries, coordinated attacks between species who had never worked together before, and somehow made the impossible combination function as a unified force. But most shocking of all was how the coalition forces treated defeated enemies. When hegemony ships were disabled, coalition vessels moved to rescue their crews. They offered medical aid to wounded aliens, safe passage to those who wanted to surrender, and even repairs to ships whose crews chose to defect. Emperor watched his fleet being systematically dismantled by enemies who kept trying to save his people's lives. It was the most alien thing he had ever witnessed. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, "they've disabled our port weapons array, but they're not firing on our life support systems. They're actually transmitting repair instructions to help us fix our environmental controls." Impossible. Enemies don't help each other in battle. But that was exactly what the coalition forces were doing. They fought to disable rather than destroy, captured rather than killed, and turned every victory into an opportunity to gain new allies rather than create new corpses. As the battle raged, more and more hegemony ships stopped firing and began transmitting surrender signals. Their crews, exhausted by 3 years of hopeless war, chose to join their former enemies rather than die for an empire that was already dead. Finally, only the Emperor's flagship remained active. It was surrounded by coalition vessels but still fighting with desperate fury. The ship's weapons blazed across space, but there were simply too many enemies to target. Admiral opened a private communication channel to the Emperor. "It's over. Your ship is disabled, your fleet has surrendered, and your empire is gone. You can end this now. Join us in building something better." The Emperor laughed, a sound like crystal mountains collapsing. "Join you, become part of your chaotic rabble? Never." "Then what do you want?" "To show the galaxy that perfection exists, that order is superior to chaos." The Emperor activated his ship's self-destruct sequence. If he couldn't win, he would at least die as he had lived, perfect, ordered, and alone. But even in his final moment, the chaos he despised reached out to save him. Admiral's ship fired precisely targeted disruptor beams that disabled the self-destruct system before it could detonate. Coalition boarding parties cut through the flagship's hull and raced toward the bridge. They found the Emperor slumped on his cracked throne, his crystal body flickering weakly. "Why?" he whispered as human medics worked to stabilize his failing life support systems. "Why save me? I am your enemy. I tried to destroy everything you built." Admiral knelt beside the dying Emperor, her face sad but determined. "Because that's who we are. We don't destroy enemies. We try to turn them into friends." "Impossible," the Emperor breathed. "Perfect things don't grow." "Perfect things don't grow," Admiral agreed gently. "And if you're not growing, you're dying." Those were the last words Emperor heard before his consciousness faded forever. 5 years later, Admiral stood in the council chambers of the Free Worlds Compact. Around her sat representatives from over 200 species, former hegemony subjects, liberated slave worlds, and even a few reformed hegemony loyalists who had chosen cooperation over domination. The chamber was loud, chaotic, and filled with arguments in dozens of languages. Different species disagreed on everything from trade policies to territorial boundaries. Some representatives couldn't even breathe the same atmosphere and had to attend via environmental suits or holograms. It was absolutely nothing like the perfect order of the old Hegemony Council. It was also the most vibrant, creative, and successful galactic government in known history. "The delegation raises a good point about mining rights," said, calling for order. "But the Saurian environmental concerns are equally valid. Perhaps we can find a compromise that addresses both issues." This was humanity's gift to the galaxy. Not superior technology or military might, but the simple idea that different perspectives could work together to create better solutions. Species that had been enemies were learning to see disagreement as an opportunity for growth rather than grounds for war. The Free Worlds Compact wasn't perfect. It was messy, argumentative, and constantly changing, but it was alive in a way the hegemony had never been. It grew, adapted, learned from its mistakes, and became stronger through diversity rather than uniformity. And across the galaxy, on thousands of worlds, billions of beings lived free to choose their own paths, make their own mistakes, and build their own futures. The age of imposed perfection was over. The age of chosen growth had begun. In challenging humanity, the hegemony had awakened something far more dangerous than sleeping giants. They had reminded the galaxy what it meant to evolve, to change, to become something better than what you were. They had taught the universe to grow again. And growth, once started, could never be stopped.